well, it's side of Colin's name that says make an attendee. I don't want to press anything that I shouldn't be, but would that help?
I think he's on now.
Lynn's already tried that.
Oh, right, okay.
Anyway,
I think Colin is.
Lynn's just telling me that
he's in now.
We're going to go live. 5 seconds, we're going live.
I presume we're live.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the West Craven Area Committee. It's the first time we've met virtually, and it's the second Pendle Council meeting that's been a virtual meeting. I hope anybody that's watching will forgive us for any mistakes that we make. We've been using Zoom and Teams for meetings in the last few weeks, but we're not experts. It's a regular meeting of a Pendle Council committee. We work to various rules, and because we're meeting online, we've got some additional protocols that we have to follow as well, but I'll explain those as we go into the meeting. First of all, I'm going to ask Joanne Eccles, if she could give us any apologies that we have.
We have Councillor Adams, Emma West, Christine Pollard, Peter Hampson and Gary Wilson. Thank you very much, Joanne.
I understand in the case of Christine that she's suffering some ill health at the moment, and I wonder whether the committee would be agreeable to sending her our best wishes for a speedy recovery. I think nods of assent would be adequate at this time. Thank you very much. In terms of the meeting, it will be a bit clunky because of the processes that we have to go through. It is a regular meeting of the West Craven Area Committee. However, we've got a very much cut down agenda, and we're just dealing with planning applications this afternoon, and also an item about town centres and funding to help get town centres back on the feet and working again. The meeting will be slightly different to the agenda that we've got, because we do have one speaker on one of the planning applications. So when we get on to that, I will take that one first. So it's the application for Crossfield Farm at Salterford will be the first planning application that we deal with. Can I now just go through all the attendees and ask them to introduce themselves? My name is David Whip. I'm one of the councillors, Pendleborough councillors in West Craven, and as you will gather, I chair the meeting. Now, if I just go to the list that I've got, we have got apologies for Marjorie Adams. I don't think Councillor Carroll has joined us as yet, but we're not knowing whether... Is that Marjorie just joining us?
No, it's Rosemary.
Sorry, Rosemary.
It's Rosemary.
Yeah. Rosemary, you're just in time to introduce yourself, if you would.
Yeah, Rosemary Carroll, the Ward Councillor.
Thank you very much. And if I could just ask you to mute yourself, Rosemary. Thank you. And then going on to Colin Carter. Colin, can you just unmute yourself and introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Colin Carter, councillor for Eby Ward.
Thank you very much. Mike Goldthorpe.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Mike Goldthorpe, councillor for Eby Ward, Pendleborough Council.
Thank you. Ken Hartley.
Hi everybody, I'm Ken Hartway, councillor for Barnoldswick, Craven Ward.
Thank you. And Jane Mills.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, Jane Mills, Pendleborough councillor for Barnoldswick.
Thank you. Jennifer Purcell.
Jennifer Purcell, good afternoon, everybody. Councillor for Craven Ward.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Councillor Tom Whip.
Afternoon, I'm Councillor Tom Whip, Councillor for Barnoldswick's Courts Ward.
Thank you. In addition, if I could just ask the officers to introduce themselves, please. You're not on my list, you see, so you'll just have to take it in turn.
Hi, my name's Neil Watson. I'm a service manager with Pendle. I'm here to advise on the planning applications.
You first, Joanne.
My name's Joanne Eccles. I'm a committee administrator and I'll be taking a note of the meeting.
Good afternoon. My name's David Walker, Environmental Services Manager and Area Coordinator for the West Craven Committee.
Thank you very much for that. Our first item on the agenda proper is any declaration of interest. And this is a legal requirement. If councillors have a prejudicial pecuniary interest in an item on the agenda, they have to declare it and withdraw from the room. So I don't know how we do that virtually, but no doubt we would find out if that was the case. Could I ask if any councillors have any prejudicial pecuniary interests? There are none, so we will note that. Our second item is the minutes of the last meeting, which were a lifetime ago on the 3rd of March. Could I ask if somebody would move those as a correct record, please? Councillor Tom Whip?
Yes, Chair, I'll move those as a correct record.
And could I ask if they are seconded, please? Colin? Seconded? Thank you. Okay. Is there anybody thinks there's any mistakes with the minutes? If not, we'll take those as read. Okay, everybody's okay with the minutes, so we will accept those as a correct record. I don't know how we've signed them in a virtual world, Joanne, but no doubt you'll chase me months to come to get signatures on these things. We're now going to go on to the planning applications, and as I mentioned earlier on, we do have a speaker on one of these. We did have more speakers, but the other ones have asked for statements to be read out. And so the planning application that we're going to consider first is for erection of a yurt and creation of a holistic therapy centre at Cross Lane, Salterford. And I've got Fiona, who has up to 5 minutes to speak on this. So if I could invite Fiona to speak for a start.
Okay, I've unmuted myself now. Can everyone hear?
That's fine, we can hear you, thank you.
Yeah, so shall I just start when I'm ready?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm Fiona Patterson, a rural practice chartered surveyor and the agent for the planning application for a yurt, car park, path and change of use of land from agricultural to holistic therapy use on land adjacent to Crossfield Farm on Salterforth Lane. The application is partly retrospective as the applicant, Mrs. Bowers, was advised by the company who she purchased the yurt from that planning permission was not required, which is why no planning application was submitted and that this application is retrospective. The yurt has been in place since August 2019. The planning officer has recommended this application for refusal as he considers it would result in unacceptable harm to the open rural character and the visual amenity of the area. We do not believe this to be the case and consider this application should be approved, and will set out the reasons why within this speech. The proposed development is for the applicant to host events from the site, which will mainly be allowing patients from local hospices to visit the site to carry out holistic treatments such as alpaca walking, yoga, massage, Reiki. The site will not be open to the general public and only pre-bookable events will take place. As part of the application, we'd also included other sports activities to be held in the yurt, such as Zumba and yoga, by non-patients and some special events like funeral teas. However, we acknowledge the planning officer's comments regarding exercise classes and funeral teas, and the applicants will be happy to exclude these uses by way of a condition as suggested within the planning officer's committee report. The holistic activities are very close to the applicant's heart, as Mrs. Bowers has recently suffered from a stroke and has therefore been in and out of hospices over the last year or so and has had first-hand experience of what it is like to be a patient in a hospice and understands the types of treatments that could be of benefit. Mrs. Bowers submitted a letter as part of this application, which I'm sure you've all read. However, to recap, whilst the applicant was at Pendle Community Hospital, the nurses found out that she had alpacas and approached her to bring them to the hospital to take them on the ward as they are very therapeutic. Many people get very depressed in hospital as a lot do not get visitors and animals always make you feel wanted. So she's seen it from a patient's point of view. We have shown that there is definitely demand for this type of activity as the hospices are in communications with the applicant, and we have provided letters of support from the Rakehead Community Neuro Rehabilitation Team. It is intended that the patients will visit the application site up to 3 times per week and will access the site in a minibus which the hospice will organise. All events will be pre-arranged and the applicant will know numbers and times before the event. The Lancashire Council's Highway Officer has been to site and has no objections to the proposed development. The Planning Officer has accepted that the proposed use is acceptable in accordance with policies WRK4 and WRK5. The Planning Officer considers that the yurt is located in a prominent and isolated position in the centre of the field and is visible from Salterforth Lane and therefore unacceptably harms the open rural character of the area. The Planning Officer has stated to me by email, quote, "I believe it may be possible for the development to be acceptably accommodated elsewhere within the applicant's land, closer to the existing buildings in a less prominent and/or isolated position." The yurt is only 40 metres from the road and is naturally screened by a dense hedgerow and trees along the roadside. The applicants are also willing to provide additional landscaping by the way of hedge planting and tree planting, and this can be dealt with by way of a condition. Moving the yurt would make it become less accessible to the patients, as currently they only have a few metres from the car park to the yurt, and moving it closer to the buildings would restrict who could access the facility. We do not consider this sustainable when the yurt is already well screened and could be further screened. Furthermore, moving the yurt closer to the buildings, it will become under an overhead electricity cable. There have been no consultee objections, and in particular, we would like to point out specifically there have been no neighbour objections, confirming that the local residents do not believe that the proposed location of the yurt causes any negative visual impact upon the local area. We hope that you'll consider the points we've raised above and will approve this application to allow a development to proceed that will provide such good to the local community.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you for your contribution. Could I ask if any members of the committee want to ask Fiona any questions? No, it doesn't look like there's any questions for you, Fiona. In which case, I'll have to ask you to mute yourself, and you're more than welcome to listen to the discussion, but I'm afraid I won't be able to bring you in again.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'll mute myself now, but I will listen to the discussion on here. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. I'm going to bring Mr. Watson in a moment. This is an application that passed my desk during lockdown at some point, and I wasn't happy for the refusal to go through without it coming to committee. I have been to look twice at the yurt in position from Salterford Lane, and I personally don't think there is a better alternative on that small holding. So my own view is that it is acceptable. However, it's the committee's decision. So bring Mr. Watson in first, and then if people can indicate by raising their virtual hands if they wish to speak, and I'll take you in turn. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to be long, just a couple of points. The policy objections can be in terms of the other uses, as John has just said, can be removed if those elements are taken away, and that's an offer that's just been made, so you could condition those out. Chairman, it's a straightforward issue now, in my view, whether you believe that it is acceptable in landscape terms. What I would caution you on is you've got to be consistent, and we have other appeals, perhaps not on the same scale, but we've argued for nearby developments being not in keeping with the character of the area. And my view is quite clearly where this is, it does not fit in with the built form of the area, and is prominent and can't be overcome adequately by landscaping. But Chairman, committee members to debate and take a view on. But I will caution you on being consistent in your decision making, because 200 yards away we've refused developments based on an impact on the character of settlements.
Thank you, Neil. I'm looking for contributions, and I've got Mike, who's raised his hand. So Mike, if you could unmute, bring you in now. Councillor Mike Goulthorpe.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. Unfortunately, having been in house arrest like Councillor Hartley for the duration, I've not been able to look at this personally. Have we got any photographs of this yurt in terms of, it looks a bit stark when you say it's clad with white and green UPVC sheeting. I wondered if we've got anything to give us some imagery about how it stands out, which seems quite an unusual cladding for a yurt. But there we go.
I mean, the appearance, it's like a tent, and the material is as you would find on a marquee. So it's the sort of white and green marquee appearance.
I see. So it's got a green roof and a white main body. Is that what I'm seeing there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that, Chairman.
Thank you, Neil. Can I bring in Councillor Ken Hartley?
Hi, Chairman. Thank you very much. I have several concerns about the yurt being where it is. Salterford Lane, for virtually all its length, is an extremely narrow, steep hill track. It also happens to be the only access road to Salterford Cemetery. And if we're proposing regular service buses, you know, in the form of a minibus supplying clients to this site, the propensity for one to meet a funeral coming in the opposite direction is quite high. And there isn't really room for two cars to pass except in very limited places on that particular road. Who gives way? What gives way? I think that the road isn't designed to take a great deal of traffic. Well, it certainly wasn't when it was built. It's in a place that there are limited passing places, and most of it is embanked on either side of the road. So there are no opportunities, if you like, to create additional passing places. I am very sympathetic to the fact that it is not in keeping with the countryside. This is Yorkshire drumlin, not the steppes of Russia. And I also have another concern, is that yet again it's taking away what in Pendle at least is relatively prime agricultural land at a time when we ought to be looking at methods of increasing agricultural production, not reducing them. There are a number of concerns there. I'm quite worried about it. My prime concern is increased traffic up and down Salterford Lane, and the fact that it is almost a one-way track, and we're proposing pretty regular traffic on it. It's already bad enough with farm traffic. Increasing it yet by 3 times a week visits from minibuses full of people, and anything up to 30 people being on site at any one time, just worries me. And again, like I say, just to close out, I'm absolutely convinced that it's the wrong thing in the wrong place. And therefore I am tempted to remain with the officer recommendation to refuse the application.
Thank you, Ken. I've got Councillor Carroll, Rosemary Carroll, indicating she wants to come in. Rosemary?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I agree with Ken actually on this one. We've got to be consistent. It is out of character with the landscape, so I will second Ken's proposal.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a mover and seconder to refuse. Can I ask if there are any further speakers? Jennifer, I think you're indicating. Jennifer, you need to unmute.
Right, I'm unmuted. I'd like to approve what Ken said on everything there, and I'd like to second it, what Ken said.
Okay, right. Well, I think that's thirded then. So, are there any alternative proposals? I'll go through the roll call. So I'm going to take people in alphabetical order. Can you say whether you're for or against? And I'll have to pause a little bit on everybody because of the time lag between my end and your end and the ether. So the first person to vote is Councillor Carroll. For or against?
For the recommendation to refuse.
Right, yeah, for, yeah. Councillor Carter?
I'm for as well, to refuse.
Yeah. Councillor Goulthorpe?
I'm unfortunately and reluctantly, I'm for the refusal as well.
Thank you. Councillor Mills?
Yeah, same as Mike, really. I'm reluctant in this one, and I'm going to have to go for the refusal.
Councillor Purcell?
I'm going for refusal as well.
Okay, I'm abstaining. And Councillor Tom Whip?
Unfortunately, Chairman, I am for as well. I think it's a shame, really, but yeah, I have to remain consistent.
Thank you. Right, so the vote is in favour of refusal, and Fiona, if you're still there, the planning manager will send a decision notice in due course. The plan application is refused. We're going to go on to our next plan application, and in the case of this one, which she says, turning the page, is also in Salterford, and this is for the erection of 34 houses on Abbey Road, Salterford, for cross construction. This is one that has had the, hang on, I'm just going to mute you all because there's a bit of feedback somewhere there. So this is one where we had a planning application for the principal, which was agreed, I think, at the time by the Development Management Committee at Pendle Council, so it was agreed centrally. So the principle of development on this site has been approved, and we now have a planning application for the reserved matters for the details. And the agent has asked for a statement to be read out, and I'm going to ask Neil Watson if he could read that statement out, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Statement on behalf of Alan Kinder. This is a statement prepared by Alan Kinder on behalf of the applicant Cross Construction Limited in support of the application. This scheme already benefits from outline planning permission under reference 160630, and therefore the principle of this development has already been firmly established, and therefore as a consequence it is purely the matters of detail which come before you today for consideration. The officer report is extremely comprehensive and fully appraises the submitted scheme against both national policy and also policies contained within the core strategy, and quite rightly concludes that it is in full accord. In more detailed terms, then the scheme seeks to deliver a number of affordable bungalows, which will be delivered as a first phase of the development in a partnership arrangement with Mossacre St Vincent Housing Association, who are active elsewhere within the borough. This element of the scheme will deliver a total of 6 affordable 2-bedroom bungalows, principally aimed at the elderly for rent. And Mossacre St Vincent's have already secured the necessary funding for this element of the project via Homes England. As such, it is intended that works on site will be scheduled to commence as soon as possible in order to ensure this first phase of development is delivered before spring of next year. In conclusion, on behalf of our joint clients, Cross Construction Limited and Mossacre St Vincent's Housing Association, then we trust that members will feel able to fully endorse the officer recommendation of approval to enable delivery of this scheme. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Neil. Is there anything that you want to say as planning manager?
No, Chairman, it's covered in the report. Any questions, obviously, I'll try and address, but I have nothing specifically to say.
Thank you. Now, committee has had the benefit of previous site visits in respect of previous applications on this land. I don't think there's anything new, but I have one question for Neil, and that the principle, together with the access, was approved under the outline application. but the current application also includes access, and I wonder, are there any changes proposed as a result of this?
Chairman, I will have to. I haven't forensically looked for alterations to this, but the view I have on that is if it's virtually identical, if not identical. But I can't honestly say that I've forensically checked over every detail, but it's virtually the same.
Thank you. I've got two people indicating. I'm not sure whether Mike Goulthorpe, you were first. So I'll bring Councillor Goulthorpe in.
Thank you, Chairman. You asked the main part of my question already for Mr. Watson, but there are a number of the 2 points I've got really. The access issue and the fact that a serious accident has taken place exactly there. On that road since this application went through the policy and resource approval. So that's point one, and I wondered if anything had been looked at in that respect, and particularly as we got access back on this for decision today. And also there's a number of outstanding minor issues on this I see, and I wonder if the odd bits here and there have been followed up and completed in this application. They are fairly minor, but I do know there are 1 or 2 in it. Okay, so that's my question for Neil Watson, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I bring Neil in?
Chairman, yes. I think that the main issue around the access arrangements were whether they were in principle acceptable at the outline stage. You know, the footway link in there, the changes on the opposite side of the carriageway, they were looked at. I know there's a difference of opinions between committees, but ostensibly they have not altered, Chairman, with this. The designs are those that in principle were approved at the outline stage. I accept that they've included this at reserved matters, but principally the design and layout, etc., and the impacts remain the same. So the answer to Councillor Goulthorpe on the first question is that they are the same. Chairman, in terms of the second, they are minor elements. We have received changes to plans, and I'm happy with that the proposal is now acceptable.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Goulthorpe, have you got anything further?
No, that response is very adequate. Thank you very much. Okay.
Can I bring in Councillor Carroll?
Thanks. Neil, have we got a layout? Can we see a layout of this development? How are they proposing to put what and where?
Can everybody see that? I've put that up.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, but very, very small.
Is that better? Is that better?
No. Can I ask where are the bungalows going? Are they what's backing onto the houses originally?
In here, bungalows in here.
Right. So what's at the back of the houses that are already there? Are they going to be 3-storey, 2-storey, or what?
Bungalows.
No.
Bungalows.
Bungalows. Where?
Chairman, through you, if I may. These are bungalows here. The height of them are what bungalows are. So they're bungalows 5 metres. There's a separation distance of beyond 22 metres between them all. So the impacts are acceptable in terms of distances. Chairman, you will have gables here on these properties to the back, and they are closer than the 21 metres, but there's no overlooking. And Chairman, those distances in terms of light and impact are acceptable distances in accordance with our supplementary planning guidance.
It's just that I can see the house numbers. I'm looking at, I think it's number 7. It's a bit tiny for me to see. Backing onto the original council houses that are already there, it looks quite close. Is there no way that the bungalows could go at that side instead to lessen the impact for the houses that are already there?
Through you, Chairman, you can always change development sites around and put different types of property in different locations. The question that we've asked within this is this relationship in itself acceptable? I think the bungalows, it's pretty straightforward. There's no issues whatsoever with those. You've got further than 12 metres away here, which is the standard we'll be looking at. You have gables, but there is some planting that will go in between. There's plenty of garden space. They're not small gardens here per se, and there will be no unacceptable light impacts there. So, Chairman, we're happy that relationship is acceptable.
Yeah, but I'm on about the original houses at the top of the lane, the council houses that's already there. This development, it looks like these houses are sideways on to the others that's already there, and they look pretty close.
Through you, Chair, are we talking about? Can everyone see the cursor?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're talking about these.
Yes. Yeah, that's the ones I'm talking about. Yeah.
Sorry, Chairman. Unless my answer was confusing, I'm satisfied that's an acceptable relationship. As I said, there's over 23 metres here. There's a gable there, but you've got over 12 metres, and you will have some planting there. There'll be no loss of light, and it won't be overbearing. So, Chairman, I'm satisfied that from a planning perspective, that is an acceptable relationship.
I would have thought the bungalows would go up better that side, less than the impact of the residents that's already there. But the other question I've got is, in the original plans, there was a request for 22 grand for the 2 bus stops. That's no longer required. Could we not still ask for that money and for it to be used to make a footpath? Because the bit of footpath you've got is going to nowhere.
Through you, Chairman, this is reserved matters. The section 106 has been signed, so sorry to be blunt, but the answer to that is no.
No. Okay, no further questions.
Okay, I've got Councillor Hartley, indicating what's coming.
Thank you, Chair. First question really is for Neil. Looking at the latest plan, which is in fact the one that you had up on the screen, the highway standard adoptable access road to the bulk of the entire estate sits directly below a grid power line, where the power lines run immediately over the road surface for virtually the full length of that adoptable standard access road. If there's a break in that power line, the entire estate will be locked in with no access for emergency vehicles except directly under the fallen power line. Is that acceptable planning practice?
Chairman, you'd have to look at that in terms of the risk of that actually happening, how often it would or wouldn't happen, and whether that risk was unacceptable. Chairman, you have power lines across sites, not every site clearly, but you have major power lines. Where I'm sitting now, half a mile away, I'm in Blackburn. There are the 240 kV cables going over the whole of the Fernhurst estate. Chairman, the likelihood of that happening is minuscule, and it wouldn't be a reason to refuse a permission.
Sorry to come back on that one, Neil. My point being really is that normally over highways, power lines cross the highways, not run overhead for any distance. It just strikes me that if there is a break in that cable, then the entire estate is locked in. there is no other way of getting into that power line run. Having said that, my next point is that the report indicates that highways had problems with the turning circle at the end of that access road, and said that they did have alternative plans that would make it acceptable. Can you confirm whether or not those have been incorporated into the latest plans?
Yes, Chairman, I can. They have been, and the highways are happy with that.
Okay, thank you. My next and final point, despite the assurance that you gave in terms of the pinch point on the highway by creation of the new footpath at the northern end of this estate, footpath which currently isn't there, it does still appear to pinch the highway at that point, and there doesn't seem to be any highway width compensation on the opposite side of the road, which I thought was part of the original acceptance in principle. In other words, that very bad bend where Mike has already cited the fact that adjacent to it we've already had one serious fatality. It just seems to pinch the highway. Maybe it's the thickness of the draftsman's pencil, I don't know. Is there any proposed work on the opposite side of the highway where that new footpath is going to be constructed?
Neil?
Chairman, the answer will be slightly different. I'm looking at the widths that are involved in that to accommodate the carriageway width. And the widths involved are to an acceptable standard. Chairman, there will be works on the other side. I can't give you the exact measurements, but the carriageway width will carry the two vehicles would have to pass there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
no further questions.
Thank you, Ken. I've got Councillor Mills, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for Neil regarding the drainage of the water off the site into the new cut. Has all that been sorted? Is that all above board with the various authorities?
Chairman, that will be part of satisfying conditions, but the principles of the runoff rates, etc., have all been agreed, but the details will be part of condition submissions. But in the principle of the type of arrangements and the runoff rates, etc., lead local flood, etc., are happy with.
Okay.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Tom Whip wanting to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I am very concerned about that power line. Just looking at the plan and looking at Google Maps, the power line does run pretty much exactly where the road is. And as Councillor Ken Hartley said, if the power line was to be damaged there, it would obstruct the road. I mean, the examples of power lines that I can think of, it's always they run perpendicular, not parallel to the highway. And is there any way we can condition it so that this current design isn't like that?
Neil?
Chairman, an unusual one, really. Thinking on my feet, I think that perhaps the way to do it would be to, if you want an answer to it, is to delegate to myself to discuss how those cables can be moved or undergrounded or altered with the applicant. So I don't think there's enough here to refuse them on that ground, because the likelihood of the cables failing are relatively small, and cables do cross highways everywhere. But in terms of the risk to that and whether that can be abated, I think we wouldn't be looking at a redesign of the scheme. You'd be looking at potentially rerouting the cables or indeed undergrounding them. But Chairman, that should be discussion perhaps between myself and the applicant.
Thank you, Neil. I've got Councillor Goulthorpe. Mike?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Very much on the lines of Councillor Tom Whipp's comments, but surely if this cable is where it is, it would make absolute sense to do whatever we can to ensure it isn't there, if that makes sense. Clearly, it wouldn't be a desirable, if we've got an opportunity to find an alternative way with this cable, rather than have it where it's proposed going to be because of the plan, we should do that. And we are taking a very strong approach on that if we're doing that. It is where it is. I understand that there are roads with cables across them, but here's an opportunity not to have a cable across them. So it goes back to Councillor Ken Hartley's initial question. Can we not ensure that for this development to go ahead on these reserve matters, that we find an alternative solution to the cable? That's basically my question. Through
you, Chairman. I'm quite clear from a planning perspective in my own mind that you couldn't refuse. We would have no legs to stand on to refuse an application on that basis. The likelihood of a cable snapping it happens. Well, I've never really heard of them snapping, if I'm honest. Those kind of KV lines, and that would then have to be simultaneous with an accident or some other emergency. Otherwise, you'd simply turn the power off and remove the cable, as you would if a large cable crossed the highway. You'd be in the same boat with that. I think, Chairman, my view would be it's a negotiation with them, but it's not a refusal for the points I've just made.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you all. I'm looking for a proposal on this application. Is there anybody prepared to put something on the metaphorical table? In which case, could I suggest that we defer this with a request that I could see Neil Watson pulling his face there. One disadvantage of this sort of meeting is that I can see your face rather than see out of the corner of my eye. I can see that a deferral is not something that Neil will be too happy with. I've got Mike, who's indicating that he wants to come in again.
Thank you, Chairman. I would certainly support your suggestion of a deferral in terms to investigate what can be done to solve the problem. It may well be that a change of plan or whatever could do that, but I think we should at least explore that before we make any final decision.
Okay.
So I would support your views, Chairman.
Okay, well, it is up to committee. Are there any alternative proposals? No one is indicating. Therefore, I think we will formally put that on the table. There's a proposal to defer with the planning manager to negotiate upon the layout to see whether something can be done with the overhead power lines. And can I take Councillor Goulthorpe's previous contribution as a second for that? And could I ask if anybody dissents, if anybody disagrees with that decision? Can you either nod your heads or shake your heads, whichever one is appropriate. Are there any people who would want to dissent from that? In which case, I think the decision of the meeting is clearly to defer for those discussions to take place, and the issue will be reconsidered at our next meeting. Can we all agree on that? Yeah. Thank you very much. That is the decision of the meeting. We now go on to our next application. And this is immediately adjacent to the field in question, and this is a change of use of agricultural land to equine and the siting of an indoor horse menage and stables. It says manage on the paperwork, but I don't think it means manage. I think it means menage, and I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it properly. Again, we have not a speaker, but a request for a statement to be read out. We also have several letters which have come in with that, which are from Pony Club and supporters in the immediate area. I think they are too lengthy to be read out, but I can give the gist of those in due course. Neil, can I ask you first of all to read out the statement on behalf of Mr. Wolfenden?
Sorry, just unmuting myself. Sorry, Chairman, apologies. Dear Chairman and committee members, thank you for hearing this application. This statement has been prepared on behalf of Mr. M. Wolfenden, the applicant, in support of an application to construct an indoor horse arena with ancillary stabling and storage to foster the talent and Olympic hopes of a local family. The proposed building is an outdoor horse arena, stables and storerooms. It is required to advance the talents and competition success of the applicant's daughter and grandson by providing advanced coaching and involved training above and beyond what is practically and financially achievable by using rented arenas and off-site coaching. To compete at a national and international level, the applicant's daughter and grandson have to train every day as well as attend to the horse's health and welfare. This means multiple journeys from site to the rented stables and arenas to exercise the horses, to practice routines, and then again in the morning and evening to muck out and feed and renew bedding and clean water, and to turn out on a regular basis and, in winter, fit and remove horse rugs. In short, the animals need near constant care. For a hobby rider, this is time-consuming and expensive. For someone trying to compete at the highest level against the best riders with the best facilities in the world is nigh on impossible. As a direct result of this struggle, many promising riders have moved out of the area to the south of England, where there are many more training facilities and greater opportunities for your riders. At 6, Rebecca joined the Pendle Pony Club and showed such promise that at 13 years old, she was picked to parade at Windsor for the Prince and Duchess. At 14, Rebecca developed a passion for show jumping and entered the Coniston Hunter Trial and won. From then on, the training became very serious and focused, training and competing with professionals and winning. Rebecca continues to compete and win and is now developing her son's talent for the sport on her homebred pony. Whilst Rebecca's son Harvey was growing up, Rebecca bred and reared a foal from Rebecca's excellent mare, as to buy one of this calibre would be prohibitively expensive. The foal was broken at Northcote Stud and proved to be an excellent pony. Rebecca and Harvey have attended training clinics with some of the best riders in the country, such as Jeff Billington and William Whittaker, but these sessions are expensive but paid off with a 4th place at the Horse of the Year show. Rebecca's son Harvey is following Rebecca and came 3rd in his first ever show and has since collected many trophies at junior level. Harvey is showing a considerable natural talent, which the family is trying to develop, but which is very difficult and expensive to do so. Off-site clinics and trainer sessions are £60 an hour minimum, and Hyde Arena schools are an hour away and £30 to £40 an hour to rent, if even available. Progressing Rebecca's and Harvey's talent to the fullest is impossible, particularly considering Harvey's commitment to school. Competing at this level requires hours and hours of practice per week, equating to hundreds of pounds in hired arenas and many hours in travelling. Even when arena hire is available and discounting the cost implication, training to the level required is impossible off-site, particularly when the horses are at a different location to the hired arena. The only workable solution to give the applicant's family a chance at succeeding at international level whilst remaining in the north of England is to provide these facilities close to hand. This facility is not simply for the whim of one fortunate enough to indulge a fancy for horses, but an absolute necessity for a family who have been passionate about competing for 3 generations and who are struggling with the exhausting routine of travelling to and from the site many times a day to tend to their animals. To have this menage and stables on site will give the newest generation of this family a chance at continuing to compete and succeed at events such as the Horse of the Year Show and Olympia. The objective is to foster the considerable and rare talent with an aim to succeed at an international level and bring home an Olympic gold medal to Pendle. The applicant's daughter and grandson have a real chance of providing Pendle with another gold postbox and to encourage other local youngsters to compete at what is increasingly becoming a Southern England sport. It is therefore respectfully requested that members support this application and foster this rare talent and encourage future generations to develop horse riding competition in the north of England. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Neil. I referred to the letters that we've also received. I think these are all on the planning portal. They're all in support. They're from local people, either connected with the Pony Club locally or connected with eventing and the like. I'll just read out one paragraph. The building Rebecca has applied for permission to build at a new home may seem quite large to someone who isn't familiar with competition horses. The building needs to be big enough to build a show jumping course to train over. It needs internal stabling, a wash-off and solarium to dry the horses after work, a feed room, a secure tack room, the hay, bedding and machinery required to look after it all. And I think that is something that wasn't there in the statement just read out by Neil. We have seen this site previously. It is adjacent to the plan application that we just considered. It is recommended for approval. I've got Councillor Carroll and then Councillor Goulthorpe. So Rosemary.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've not got a problem with this. I'll move the recommendation that we approve it.
Thank you, Mike Goulthorpe.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I see no problems with this whatsoever. I think it's a great addition, and also it secures the land for some activity that will bring hopefully some pride into Pendle, rather than houses. So yes, I would second Councillor Carroll's motion to approve.
Thank you very much. It's moved and seconded that we approve this one. Can I ask if there are anybody wanting to voice a contrary view? In which case, can I move to a vote on this? Oh, Ken, sorry. Ken?
My hand's been raised for a little while.
Go ahead.
I've listened hard to both the appellant and the supporters' letters and the comments from Councillors Carroll and Goulthorpe. And I'm really kind of torn between two thought patterns on this. One is to support the Irby councillors and say yes, it's a good thing. I'm all for increasing the utilisation of the land that we have, apart from handing it over to developers. However, it does represent two problems as far as I'm concerned. Firstly, it is an extension of the ribbon development of North Home Estate into Salterford Parish. It's yet another nail in the coffin in terms of ribbon development of Salterford Road. The second is really loss of agricultural land, which is associated with it. Horses are notoriously destructive as far as land is concerned. And there's another problem that worries me as well. It's slightly higher than the previous application that we've just been discussing. And the problem of contamination of horse manure filtering down into what I accept is inevitably going to be a final approval for the previous application hasn't been adequately dealt with, as far as I can see, in the report or the planning applications that we've got. Having said that, I also accept, probably before Neil tells me, that my concerns in terms of the contamination of land can be conditioned into an acceptance. You can't condition the ribbon development bit, but unfortunately I think I'm going to accept that. So, on balance, if we can apply a strong condition to the treatment of the byproduct of this facility, then reluctantly I'll join Rosie and Mike in supporting the application. But I would like to see some strong condition associated with the treatment of horse manure associated with this development.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah. I'll bring Neil in.
Thank you, Chairman. Just 2 points. Loss of agricultural land, Chairman. In planning advice terms, the national policies, you only can refuse things if it's loss of grade 1 and 2 agricultural land, which it isn't, because we've none in Pendle, because we looked at that at the last local plan. So that's a really difficult one for us. Chairman, in terms of horse manure, horse manure isn't it can be a pollutant, but it's not potent. It's not like silage or something of that order. And condition 17 of the proposed conditions relates to a containment drainage system. So I think it's covered in the existing, in the proposed conditions.
Condition 6, I think, also is relevant. Not condition 17.
Is it? I've got the wrong one.
Condition 6. Prior to the equine use hereby approved, a scheme for the containment and storage of manure shall be submitted and approved.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we do approve this, subject to the conditions set out. If I can go through the roll call again. So, Councillor Carroll, are you for or against the proposal to approve?
For the proposal to approve.
For?
Yep.
Councillor Carter?
I'm for to approve.
Councillor Goulthorpe,
Thank you, Chairman, for the approval.
Councillor Hartley,
Reluctantly for.
and Councillor Mills,
Yes, for the approval.
Councillor Bazell.
Yes, for the approval.
I'll vote in favour of approval. Councillor Tom Whip.
I am for.
Thank you very much. So that's carried unanimously. So again, the planning manager will issue a decision notice on that in due course. And we go on to our, I think it's the final plan application. Who's taking the phone call? If you can mute your microphones, please. So the next application is land to the west of former Whitemore pumping station, and it's the erection of 26 holiday lodges with associated reception building. We have seen this previously and had a site visit. The current application is an amended scheme and it is recommended for approval. I don't have any speakers or statements which relate to this one. Neil, can I ask you to introduce it, please?
Chairman, yes, if I may put up just a slide on this, which may just help. So if I can indulge me with that. Chairman, wrong one. Let's get to it. Chairman, we've been here before. We had a site visit. We went around the application. If you recall, it was a balanced recommendation of refusal we went to last time based on the provision of some infrastructure here, the reception building, and how that impacted on the visual and aspects of the area and landscape. Chairman, that's now been moved so that it's more integrated within the site. Chairman, we also had issues around the quarry edge, and that's all been addressed. Chairman, we've come to the conclusion that it is in an isolated location, but bearing in mind the need to sustain the countryside tourism, with the changes made, the recommendation is that the planning balance has altered to the point where we can now recommend approval to the application. Chairman, there were some concerns before about vehicles being able to ingress and egress onto the main road, the carriageway in front of the site. We have had swept path models done to show that service vehicles, bin wagons, fire engines, etc., can manoeuvre in and out. So we're satisfied that the site can be accessed safely now. Other than that, Chairman, everything else I think is covered in the report.
Thank you very much for that, Neil. I've got Councillor Tom Whip, who's indicated, and Councillor Mike Goulthorpe. So, Councillor Tom Whip.
Thank you, Chair. Personally, I'm delighted that this has come before us again, and I'm glad to see that the issues of the previous application have been worked through and improved upon. Just in terms of the access, because last time that was a big issue for people, and I think it was the connection of public transport to the site that was the major issue there. I don't see any changes to that. So is it just purely on the balance overall why that is no longer a reason for refusal?
Through you, Chairman, yes, there is always a waiting process. So I'm using my hands. There's always a waiting process to go through. And if you add in the pros and cons to a development, the clearly pros are it's tourism related, it's investment, etc. The cons were landscape impacts, lack of accessibility. When that changes, when the visual aspects are reduced, when you get an improvement into the layout, etc., it sits better in the landscape. We've proved that the access arrangements now in themselves can work adequately with the radii. Chairman, it is a balanced recommendation, but our view is that planning balance has now altered to recognise that there are disbenefits because of the connections into settlements, but at the same time it will be a good tourist facility in that area and will bring wealth and income there. And when we take out some of the major concerns we had about landscape, Chairman, our view has altered to be able to recommend approval to the scheme.
Thank you, Neil. Can I ask Councillor Tom Whip, have you got any further contribution?
Well, I would like to move to approve this application in line with the officer recommendations.
Thank you. I've got several other speakers now, so my next one is Councillor Goulthorpe. Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. Two points really, both for Neil Watson in part. This site is totally unsustainable in terms of, just putting everything else to one side, in terms of its location and not being able to plug into any other access but vehicle usage. So, and it also says here in the report, the unsustainable location with no access to public transport would result in a significant increase in car usage. If we went ahead and accepted the view that in balance it's acceptable to because of what it could bring to the area, does that cause us problems in future in terms of using unsustainability and large vehicle and significant vehicle usage on further applications in the future? That's question one. And then just a quick second question. In terms of the license of this site, is it a 12-month site that is going to be applied for, and hence the lodges would tend to be taken up by permanent tourist residential, not living there permanently, but once those sites are taken up, that is it. There is no ongoing tourist increase. These people will use the site, use the lodges, as quite a few of us do, on a long-term basis. So those are two questions really for Neil before I go any further with my views on this. Thank you.
Can I bring Neil in?
Chairman, if I may answer the second point first, because it's probably a little simpler to answer in some ways. What we used to do up until about 10 years ago is put a condition on to say something around you can stay in the unit for up to 4 weeks, but not return for 6 weeks. And then that was meant to be to have a throughput for holidaymakers. I'll be candid. My view is that the planning inspectorates have got this wrong, but nevertheless we are where we are. Planning inspectorate said if it's holiday, you put a holiday condition on, and that's a standard condition that basically like or lump, and that is basically you have to use it for a holiday home and you have to have another address elsewhere. Now, I'm aware that people try and get around that, but I don't think there's another mechanism we've got to make it a site that will be used by 20 different sets of occupants in a year, because they'd simply go to appeal and we will get bashed by the planning inspectorate, even though I think the planning inspectorate are wrong. Chairman, the first question, you can always argue precedent, but you have to look at each case on its merits. And if you had one isolated property elsewhere with no bus service to it, it would have different connotations than what I think will be quite a large and attractive site to the area, which will bring in quite a lot of income and investment and the jobs that go with it, etc. So you're absolutely right to think about precedents, and it is not in a sustainable location purely in terms of transport, but there are larger benefits, and we are encouraged to encourage tourism. It's of a scale that I think will have a benefit to the local economy, even though that there won't be immediate link trips. So it is a balancing exercise. I don't think it will create a precedent, because we are saying these individual characteristics of this site and the scale of it and the location, the quality, make it acceptable. Clearly, you may have different views on that, but that's the conclusion we as officers reached.
Mike, do you want to come back in?
No, I mean, thank you for that. I'm just worried about, we've been talking about car usage up and down our various narrow lanes around the area. I just think, although the site may come in with no problems in terms of highways, you are going to have increase in traffic up there for servicing of any static setup. You've got all sorts of connotations coming into play with this, not least gas bottles and such like. But if everybody's happy with what possible effect that could have on the network around there, in road networks, then fine. I must just hold my hand up. Unfortunately, if you remember from our initial discussions on this, I didn't make the first site visit, and of course, one or two of us got overtaken by events in the lockdown, and I've got to say I have not visited the site. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I'll just come in at this point. In terms of the overall use of that route, a development of this nature will add a very marginal amount of traffic to the level on there. I mean, I use the route reasonably regularly. If there's a tractor or a HGV going over there, then the build-up of traffic is, the queuing traffic behind it is quite startling. So that there's a lot of vehicles already using the route, and the number of additional vehicles as a consequence of this development, I think, will be very marginal indeed. The broader issue, I mean, Neil has referred to the quality of the development, and I have to say that when we had the original site visit, I was impressed by the standard of work that has been carried out on the previous residential developments by the developer, and the ambition to create a development which was very much part and parcel of the landscape. The materials that they're going to use, I mean, you mentioned statics in there. Well, all these units are going to be built on site. They're going to use stone that has come out of the quarry, which is in the same ownership as the old waterworks, and they're going to make use of that brownfield site and turn it into something that will create business for other people in the area. And I think coming out of COVID-19, that we are going to be desperate for business, and I think that the benefit that relatively high spending visitors will bring to local pubs and other outlets will be pretty vital. So I appreciate that this isn't going to happen overnight, but I think taking all in all that benefit does outweigh any disbenefits that people rightly see might be the case. I've got Councillor Carroll and then Councillor Mills, and I've got Jennifer indicating as well. So can I bring Rosemary in?
Yeah, Chair. Chair, for me, nothing has changed on this. The reasons for refusal are just the same. They're totally unacceptable because it's not the access out, it's further down in the village that it's going to affect. And earlier you wanted us to be consistent, and we turned down the yurt because of its isolated position and it results in unacceptable farm total in rural countryside. And it's contrary to policy in V2. Well, I'd say this same thing applies to this one as well. So I'm sorry, but I will move that we refuse this application for the same reasons.
Thank you. Just to point out that I didn't oppose the yurt. I've got Councillor Mills next.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. I've got mixed feelings about this one. With regarding to the benefits it's going to bring, it's going to be a fantastic facility. But I have concerns about people using the bikes and walking, going down onto that stretch of road, which is very narrow. The people that are going to be going to these lodges, I presume there will be walkers and cyclists. We've got a big uptake in cycling now in the area. My concern is that, you know, there could be possibly an injury accident to someone in that area. Is there anything at all that could be put into place to take these people away from that, walking in that area? It's really to Neil, I suppose, is that one?
Well, before I bring Neil back in, I understand from the applicants that they offered to create a cycle lane between the junction of the development with the bridleways and footpaths in the direction of the former Fanny Gray, and the County Council didn't agree with that. Excuse me. The County Council said that they would not support it. So the applicants themselves have wanted to develop cycle links and footpath links to the network that's in the area. They haven't been supported by the Highway Authority. I'll bring Neil in now.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this probably speaks for itself. I would always caution members, if, and I'm not saying it's going to be a refusal, but if there was, you wanted to refuse it, not to introduce new reasons over and above those that were used last time, because the issues effectively are the same as last time, apart from changing design iterations within that, moving the visitor facility, etc. there. So, Chairman, if we are going to, if there's a proposal to refuse, and if it brings in traffic issues, Chairman, it may well, I may have to come back in to look at policy and resources. And I'll put the reasons for refusal up for last time so that members can be clear as to exactly why it was refused last time.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I do recall that the last meeting when we discussed this previously, or the previous application, that I stressed the issue about the transport, and that wasn't used as a reason for refusal. I had Councillor Tom Whip indicating, and I've got Mike Goldthorpe wanting to come back.
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to Councillor Carroll's comments on the consistency and the previous application we considered today, I think there's a huge difference between what do you call it? It's a yurt and stone buildings made out of natural stone from that very site. And secondly, I'm looking at the footpath map of the area, and there are a considerable number of connections from the opposite the site on the other side of the road to the footpath network. So I think the suggestion that there's only a connection via car isn't so concrete if you consider if, as you say, the people that would visit here are most likely to be walkers, and there are footpath connections to the site. And I could share this map with you if you wanted. But that is what is alleviating my concerns about the connection, and I hope that other members can appreciate that as well.
I'd be delighted if you could demonstrate your technical prowess and share the map with us. So we'll challenge you to see whether you can manage that. Ooh. Okay. And the footpath links? Okay, thank you very much. Lovely. I think we've seen adequate there. And we give Councillor Tom Witt 10 out of 10 for technical prowess. I've got Mike Goulthorpe wanting to come in next. So Mike.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Am I right in saying that as at the last application we refused, the unsustainability was in that refusal?
Yes.
Yes. Then, quite frankly, I'm of the view that we can use that again, can we not? Right. Yes. Well, on that basis, I would move a motion that we refuse this application based on its unsustainability.
Okay, I think Councillor Carroll has already moved refusal, so perhaps
then on that basis, if it's the same, I would second that.
Okay, thank you. Now we've got an original proposal from Councillor Tom Witt, who proposed approval subject to condition. I will second that, so we'll take that as an amendment in due course. I've got David Walker was indicating he wanted to come in, so ask David.
Thank you, Chair. I was just making you aware that Councillor Purcell had expressed a desire to speak earlier on.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for that reminder. Can I bring Jennifer in?
Thank you for fetching me back in. I've heard all what's been said and I've nothing to add to it. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any further contributions? Could I just check? Ken did indicate that he would have or is likely to have an interruption during the meeting, and I think from what I've seen and the fact that he's come off video, that Ken may not be taking part in the meeting now. Can I just check that? Councillor Hartley?
Sorry, I am back, but I've missed the entire discussion virtually of this item on the agenda. So with your permission, I will rejoin the meeting, but abstain in this particular instance.
Okay. The position we are at is that there's a proposal from Councillor Carroll, seconded by Councillor Goulthorpe, to refuse on grounds of unsustainability. There's a proposal from Councillor Tom Witt, seconded by myself, as an amendment to approve subject to the conditions set out in the report. And we're just about to move to the vote. So are there any further speakers? If not, we're going to vote on the amendment, which is to approve subject to the, well, it's moving the officer's recommendation, essentially. So you are for or against. Councillor Carroll?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Carter?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Goulthorpe?
Against.
Councillor Hartley?
Abstain.
Councillor Mills?
Abstain.
Councillor Purcell?
Against.
Okay. I'll vote for. Councillor Tomwitt?
For.
Okay, so that is lost. I'll now move to the proposal to refuse on the grounds of unsustainability and take the roll call again. Councillor Carroll, are you for or against refusal?
For refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Carter?
For refusal.
Councillor Goulthorpe?
For the refusal.
Councillor Hartley?
Abstain.
Councillor Mills?
Sorry, abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Purcell?
Against.
Okay. I'll vote against. Councillor Tom Whip, are you for or against?
I am against.
Okay. I will go to my referee, Joanne. How do you record that vote? I think it's not carried.
So it's 3 for, 3 against, 2 abstentions. So you would have to use your casting vote as chairman.
Well, I will say it's not carried. Which leaves us without a decision.
It doesn't.
Vote again. Can we have another vote again?
Well, we've already disposed of that proposal. I'm not sure if it ought to be referred to Policy and Resources. Councillor Tom Whip.
Chairman, if there's no majority here to make a decision one way or the other, I think it should be referred upwards. I don't think it's, sensible to keep redoing votes when there's already a vote that did not have a majority.
Okay.
Neil, can I just ask if you're happy for that to go to DM? Would you take legal advice on that, or?
I looked at it before. I have not got the constitution in front of me, but I'm fairly confident that a committee can refer any planning application to Policy and Resources. But I think it should be to me, it would have to be a vote on that.
Okay.
To refer that up. That's my understanding of where the constitution is.
Thank you. Mike, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, Chairman, clearly Councillor Purcell didn't understand the question at the time, but we'll put that to one side. I think we could have a further, Councillor Carter, for instance, could put forward another motion to amend the situation and move it forward from a deadlock.
Okay, well, I'll test the water with referring it to Policy and Resources. So I'll move that we do refer this to Policy and Resources. Is that seconded?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Can we take a vote on that? Yeah, and so I'm going to do the roll call again. This is a referral without any recommendation to Policy Resources. Councillor Carroll.
Against.
Councillor Carter.
Against.
Councillor Goulthorpe.
Against.
Councillor Hartley.
For.
Councillor Mills.
For.
Councillor Purcell.
Against.
I'll vote for. Councillor Tomwitt.
For.
Okay, I think that's 4-4.
That's right.
And I'll vote in favour, so it stands referred to Policy and Resources, which I'm sure all the members of Policy and Resources will love us to bits. No. So effectively it's deferred, and I understand that there's a meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee scheduled, or it's in the calendar for later this month. So it will be considered at that meeting.
Yeah, it's on the 25th of June, David.
Yeah, so 25th of June, people want to put that in their calendars. Thank you very much. I think that brings us to the end of the planning applications. Just make sure that I haven't missed one. No, I think we've done them all. Just ask, I was expecting committee to consider the Barnsley Mill application, Neil, and make its views known on that one. Could you just let us know where that's at, please?
The Barnsley Shed, Chairman, there's an outstanding matter the applicants want to deal with on noise before it's brought back. So that hasn't, as far as I'm aware, unless it's been resolved today, been resolved. So they're trying to work through that issue, Chairman. Okay, so we'll look to see that at Area Committee in due course. As soon as we can, yes, Chairman. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go on now to... Sorry, who's in Chair.
Yeah, just before you leave planning matters, can I ask for an item of clarification from Neil? The Seddons application for the field in Salterford has been referred to the appeal tribunal. Are Seddons in this case appealing against Pendle Council decision or against an inspector's decision, or both, or neither?
Through you, Chairman, it's a straightforward Section 78 appeal against the decision of Pendle. It's not a High Court challenge this time.
Okay, thank you, Neil.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We will move on to item 4. And item 4 is the reopening of Pendle's town centres. And members will be aware that the government have said that they will lift the restrictions on most non-essential retail premises with effect from next Monday. This is subject to various provisos, and the government have allocated funding to help make retail areas safe. In terms of Pendle, the overall allocation is just over £81,000, and that has been broken down, excuse me, with West Craven getting an allocation of £11,317, and this is to develop an action plan, engaging businesses, parish and town councils, allowing communications, public information, awareness raising with businesses, on social distancing and how to make temporary adjustments to the premises and physical adjustments, temporary physical adjustments to town centre public spaces as well. So the funding allocation from the government grant, £11,317, I'm suggesting that we split that in the time-honoured fashion, 2/3, 1/3, so that 1/3 would be for necessary expenditure in EAB. I can't think that Culbrook and Salterford will have any retail expenditure, but there may be some. And 2/3 in Barnoldswick. I'm also suggesting that we invite the two town councils, EAB and Barnoldswick, to join us in a task group approach to carrying out measures as a matter of urgency. And again, the two town councils, with Salterford and Culbrook not really having any retail to speak of. And that as an area committee, insofar as Barnoldswick's concerned, that we allocate £3,000 from our capital programme towards capital expenditure that may be necessary as a result. That we set up a task group with two task groups, EAB and Barnoldswick, with representatives from this committee, invite representatives from the respective town councils, and if there are any retail organisations that could play a part, to invite those as well. And the remit to consider as a matter of urgency measures to revitalise the town centres, respective town centres, following the COVID-19 outbreak. Does all that make sense?
Yes.
Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I totally support everything you're saying. There are some logistic issues, I guess. For instance, Ken and I will not be participating in any face-to-face activity, clearly, as we're in the shielded group. Although it's quite clear you could probably expand certain areas, but how you're going to do it in terms of being able to make that task group active on the high street and everything else will have to be thought through. But there are issues there, and yeah, I think you've got to involve the town councils without a doubt. And yes, I'm certain we'll have a look at what extra funding is required out of the kitties and so forth. Particularly, AB has its own problems, although it's only got one main street there. But there are some major access problems on the top half of the high street, if you can call it that, where the things like footpaths and what have you are extremely narrow, and issues of road and pedestrian safety will come into it as well. So yeah, I think the sooner we get it going, the better. I'm worried about how we're going to do the communications, Chairman.
Okay, in terms of communication between people taking part in the task group, I would envisage it would be of this sort of nature, where we would meet virtually. It's almost impossible to do otherwise. We have had an odd site visit in Barnoldswick, because the complicating factor in Barlick is next month we'll have work beginning on the town square resurfacing, and that involves Albert Road, clearly Principal Shopping Street, and so we met on site between the contractors, Pendle Council, and representatives from this area committee and the town council. That worked quite well, and subsequently I visited most of the businesses directly affected there. So yeah, it is possible to do it, and you know, we can play that by ear. But I think principally we would meet virtually, and that would be the way to do it. The government funding is quite restrictive, and it's also European funding, which has its own requirements in terms of spend. So that funding, I would say, is slightly difficult. I would hope that the town councils could make a financial contribution so that some of the softer stuff which isn't allowed by either our capital programme or the government funding could be addressed as well. But clearly that's up to the respective town councils. I'm not seeing anybody else indicating they want to speak. Any further contributions? Ken?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I would support the proposal that you outlined there. I think it's a reasonable way of attacking the problem. I'll contribute in any way that I can, recognising the shielding restrictions under which I'm still, in theory, subject to.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Chair.
Jane?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would fully support this, and just think that we should move quickly with it, with the timescales that we've got in mind, and to set up the groups and get on with it as soon as possible.
Thank you. Any further contributions? Jennifer, are you wanting to come in?
No, I'm fine. I'm just listening to everybody.
Okay. It's just that you'd unmuted, and I wasn't quite certain if you wanted to come in. Colin, were you indicating then? No. Right, so we've got a proposal on the table. Can we indicate assent rather than me putting it formally to the vote? People are nodding vigorously, putting the thumbs up. Is there anybody wanting to shake their heads? No. In that case, I think we'll take that as carried. Can I thank everybody very much for taking part in the meeting? Can I also thank anybody that suffered actually watching this on the, I don't know whether you call it a webcast or broadcast, a YouTube channel?
That would be a live stream, Chair.
Okay. Can I thank anybody for watching the live stream? And talking about live streams, Rosemary, you still sound as if you've got a live stream.
Yeah, can I just ask a question before we go? Are you planning on holding these meetings in the afternoons on a regular basis? Because, you know, some of us do work for a living.
I fully appreciate that, and I and my group has expressed the wish to return to an evening format. The reason for the afternoon is because of the requirement to have some technical assistance on hand. That may well evaporate. The other issue is that it does require two people in committee section rather than one. So it's a case of needs must with the current arrangement. But I've certainly expressed the wish that we return to evening meetings. And I look forward to the day when we can meet in person rather than over the tinterweb.
Okay.
On that note, can I thank you all very, very much. I generally wish people a safe journey to wherever they may be going, but I think I'll just express the wish that I hope you all stay safe until we do meet either virtually or in person. Can I thank you very much and declare the meeting closed?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.